Have you ever wanted to watch your Roku or Fire TV while you were away on vacation or maybe traveling for work? Did it tell you you couldn't because you weren't at home? Today, we're going to learn how to fix that using a Raspberry Pi and a tiny little GL.iNet travel router. Stay tuned. Like and subscribe if you like the content. Leave me a comment below if you have a question or other comment, and I'll be happy to answer you. These are the parts we'll be using today. We'll need a Raspberry Pi. This happens to be a Model 3, but a Model 4 works as well. The GL.iNet router, micro SD card and adapter, micro USB cable to power the router, network cable, and you may need a USB to network adapter if you don't have one on your computer, if you don't have a network jack on your computer. And obviously later on you're going to need a power supply for the Raspberry Pi and a power supply for the GL.iNet router. I use a cheap little $1 one from Dollar Tree. Works just fine. Sometimes they're hard to find there, but anything that will supply up to half an amp at 5 volts should be perfectly fine. So let's get started. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about how this works. We're going to install a Raspberry Pi at the house. It's going to run a product called PiVPN, which uses virtual private networking software, WireGuard or OpenVPN. We're going to recommend you use WireGuard here. What this does is this accepts VPN connections from the GL.iNet device that you're going to take with you when you travel. The GL.iNet device will connect to the guest network of the hotel or library or friend's house, wherever you may be, and it will set up an encrypted tunnel back to the PiVPN so that anything that goes through the GL.iNet will appear to be at your house. Then the GL.iNet rebroadcasts wireless. So it connects wirelessly to the guest network, but then it also creates a wireless network. And the trick here is that we're going to call this wireless network exactly the same as the wireless network that you have at home. So if, for example, you have a home network called Planet Atkins, it will rebroadcast Planet Atkins. So when you connect it up and it gets connected to the wireless through the VPN, it shows that it's connected. When you fire up your Roku or your Fire TV, it's going to see your home network. It's going to connect, route it all out, and because it's coming from your home back to Hulu or Netflix or wherever, it's going to think you're still at home. Performance will be a little bit slower than normal, but it works perfectly fine. I've actually tested this myself. Another advantage here is that it doesn't just have to be your Fire TV or your Roku. You can actually take your laptop or any of your tablets. They'll connect to the same network, and they will be tunneled back to your house, protecting all your data. So you're actually creating a VPN that's safe and secure and will actually help protect you as well. So you can connect your other devices to it as well. It doesn't just have to be Fire or Roku, but for the purposes of this, we're talking about the Fire TV and Roku. The first thing we need to do is go to the Raspberry Pi website, to Downloads, and get the Raspberry Pi Imager for Windows. Let's go ahead and click that and let it download. Downloads pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and open it up. And run the install. And we'll tell it to go ahead and run the Imager. We'll take our micro SD card, put it in the adapter, stick it in the slot inside of our computer here. And we will choose Raspberry Pi OS. And we will choose our SD card. And we tell it to write. Warns us that everything in there will be deleted, and yes, of course, that's what we want to do because we want to start fresh. Here we go. All right, it's finished. We'll go ahead and pull the card out, tell it we're ready to continue, and we'll go ahead and close the Raspberry Pi imager. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we're going to create a file on the boot image here that will allow us to remote into it over the network. That is not enabled by default, so we need to enable that. It's very simple. Put the card back in. And you'll see it should ask us, we can actually just go to, File Explorer, scroll down here to, this is your boot drive. Click on it, and right click and do a new text document. You'll see it shows a new text document here at the bottom. We want to call this SSH, and we want to remove the .text. So it's just SSH. What that does is when the Raspberry Pi boots, it allows you to remotely log into the system. Windows will complain because we removed the .text. Yes, that's exactly what we want to do. So we'll do that. We will go over here and we'll eject this card. We'll pull it up. The next thing we need to do is to take the micro SD card out of the adapter. And we're going to plug it into the Raspberry Pi. Now, one thing to note here is it goes in the bottom of the Raspberry Pi, and it goes with the contacts facing the board. Basically just press it in. That's all there is to it. So let's go take it and boot it. Okay, let's boot up our Raspberry Pi. You can see over here on the side, I've got the power connector, the HDMI connector. There's a network cable plugged into the side here. We're not using wireless. You should not use wireless for this. And then there is a keyboard connected to the USB connector. So let's fire her up. Alrighty, here she comes. First thing it does is it resizes the file system, then reboots. Really all we need here is to get the IP address of the device. This is the easiest way to do it, is to boot it with a keyboard and mouse. You can look in your router and find it as well, but this way is a lot easier for me. Here it's telling us that SSH is enabled. This is what we did when we created that SSH file. And we will do some of these others in a bit. The first thing we want to do is go up here, open up a command prompt. Let's make it big enough to actually see, and do the command if config. What we're looking for is this section right here under ETH0, which is the wired connection. We have the address 10.0.250.48. 10.0.250.48. There is no wireless configured. We're not going to configure wireless on this device. And that's all we need. So let's shut it down. Command shut down -H now. This means shut down, halt the system, and don't do it in a little while. Let's do it now. And that's it. Now we're going to connect it up and do some additional configuration. Now that we have the Raspberry Pi's IP address, the next thing we need to do is to go into your router. I'm showing you Linksys here. Every router is a little bit different, and even Linksys are not all exactly the same. But someplace in there you'll find the DHCP server, and you'll see a section for DHCP reservations. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to set that reservation so that the IP address of the Raspberry Pi never changes. Anytime it reboots, it'll always get the same IP address. This is important because later on we'll actually be using this for connectivity to the router and allowing connectivity from the internet into this device. So if its IP address changes, it'll break that connection. So go into your router, figure out how to set a DHCP reservation for the device. You know its IP address, so it should be relatively straightforward to find. The next step is for us to set up what is called Dynamic DNS. In the same way that your Raspberry Pi on your internal network can change IP addresses, your ISP through your cable company or however you have internet connectivity occasionally will change your IP address as well. So if you're away on vacation and it happens to be halfway through vacation that your IP changes your IP address of your home, then it can't connect anymore. So we'll show you how to get around that. First thing you need to do is go to dynv6.com. It'll come up with privacy settings. We don't want any marketing, so we will just confirm that selection. The next thing that we need to do is get your free Dynamic DNS. You go to the website here and you type in your email address. Oops, I didn't do that right. Let's try putting in the right information. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to create a dynamic DNS entry for your home network. This is important because in the same way that your Raspberry Pi in your home network could change IP addresses, the internet service provider that you use, the cable company or whomever, can also change your IP address on occasion. So if you're on vacation and it changes in the middle, that's going to be a problem because you won't be able to connect back to your VPN. So we're going to get around that by creating a free dynamic DNS. You go that by going to dynv6.com. It'll ask you about your privacy settings. We only want necessary cookies. We're going to stay out of the marketing, and we are going to confirm that selection. The next thing we need to do is just simply enter some information. Our name is going to be Planet Atkins VPN Video. And our email address we're going to use is it really doesn't like this. There we go. So it wants the actual name that it's going to use. So we'll put in Planet Atkins VPN Video. Obviously, you would use your own name or some permutation. Put in your email address here. Make sure it's spelled correctly. And click Go. What it does is it sends you an email, and we'll go check that. Okay, they send you an email, and they need you to click on a link to confirm your email address. It takes you here where you enter a password. You tell them that I am not a robot. Oh, I'm going to have to go through the CAPTCHA here. Looks like all the motorcycles to me. And then we will sign in. We'll go ahead and tell it to remember us. All right, we are set up. The next thing you need to do is to get this right here, and you can use this later on. So write that down. In your case, it'll be home or whatever you use. Click on here and edit the zone. And what you want to do is you want to click on set the current address. If you're at home, when you click on this, it will actually set this to your current address. So go ahead and click that. And that's all you need to do. And you will see, if you go here to My Zones, you will see, oops, forgot to click Update Zone. Click Update Zone, and now it's all configured. Okay, let's get the Raspberry Pi configured. Go ahead and start PuTTY. You'll find links to download PuTTY in the description below. And the first thing we need to do is put in the IP address that we found earlier. In this case, it's 250.48. We're going to save this as PiVPN. Just makes it easier. We don't have to type that in the future. And we'll open it. This warning just simply means that it has not seen this device before. So yes, we want to continue. And we will log in as Pi, and the password is Raspberry, R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y. All right, the very first thing that we want to do is raspi config. So type sudo raspi config. Sudo just means run this as super user, which gives it administrative privileges. First thing we want to do is change the password for the default user. Put in a new password. And it was successfully changed. Next thing we want to do is go down here to localization options. These Raspberry Pis are designed in England, Great Britain, so we will change our locale to the United States. We'll go down here to EN. You'll see EN GB UTF-8 is the default. That means English, Great Britain, and UTF-8 is the locale type. So we will go down here and we want EN US UTF-8. We select it by pressing the space bar. You need to leave the EN-GB selected as well. Select the EN-US UTF-8. The way you select this by pressing the space bar. See how it turns the asterisk on and off. Hit Tab, OK. And we want to change the default to EN-US. And we say OK. Let it churn and trundle here for a minute or two. By the way, if you're curious, UTF stands for the Unicode Transformation Format. It's just a character encoding that the system uses. One of the biggest changes is the Great Britain keyboard is slightly different than the American keyboard, so you'll have a little bit of trouble with some special keys as well. So let's go back to the localization options, and we want to change our time zone. Since I am in America, and I am in the US, I am Central Time. And that's all we really need to do here. So we'll finish. Now the next thing we want to do is run updates to make sure that everything is as up to date as possible. In the same way with Windows, you can check for updates and you can actually apply updates. The Raspberry Pi behaves similarly. So we'll do sudo apt-get update -y. What this command does is run a super user. apt-get is the program to do installs, tells it to check for any updates, and automatically apply them. This is just looking for updates, not actually applying the updates. It's just looking to see if there are any updates. This just takes a minute. All right, the next thing we want to do is apt-get, sudo apt-get, and we're going to do an upgrade. Upgrade means actually apply any of the updates that we may have just found. The -y means don't ask any questions, just go ahead and say yes as the default to all the prompts. This will take a couple of minutes. Okay, the updates are all done, so let's go ahead and reboot. All right, the Raspberry Pi is up to date. Let's go ahead and reconnect. We're going to restart this session. I'm going to log in as Pi with the password we entered earlier. Okay. The next thing we want to do is let's start installing the VPN software. If you go to PiVPN.io, this is where you get the software from, and you'll see there's a command here. It's very simple. You can just copy that. And the way you paste in PuTTY is you don't have to do a Control V or anything else. You just right click in here. Oops. Sorry, let's try that again. Copy that. Then you right click. And the command is curl -L and then the install PiVPN and runs it through bash. You don't need to understand that. We only run this one time and we let it rip. This takes a little while as well. Okay, it is requesting a static IP address. Remember, we did a DHCP reservation earlier to make sure that your Raspberry Pi always gets the same IP address. So it is saying we have a DHCP reservation. You can set up a static IP address here if you want, but I prefer to keep the static reservation. If you didn't do that, you may want to set up the static IP address. So yes, we are going to keep it. We're going to select the local user. We only have one local user. It's the Pi user, and that's okay. So we just hit Tab and OK, and it trundles away a little bit more. Here you can select either WireGuard or OpenVPN. I am going to use WireGuard in this particular case. It seems to operate a little bit faster, a little bit better. So we will go through and keep WireGuard selected and just say OK. Okay. This is the default WireGuard port. When you set up forwarding in your router, you will need to make sure that you use this particular port. So you'll want to accept the defaults here. Yes. And you need to select the DNS provider. I just accepted the defaults. And it's asking if you want to use your external public IP or use a DNS entry. We use the DYN v6, so let's use that as our entry. This is the name that you entered in earlier when you were setting up the DYN v6. Now it'll generate the server keys. It recommends that you set up unattended upgrades. This is a good thing. So yes, you want to accept unattended upgrades. All this means is it'll regularly check to see if there are any patches that need to be applied and apply them. However, it does not reboot automatically. We'll show you how to do that in a little bit. Okay, it's telling you to use PiVPN add. We'll walk through that here in just a little bit. And it recommends that we reboot. So yes, we want to reboot. Okay, we give it a few seconds to get rebooted here, and we will restart this session. Log in as Pi with the password. And first thing we want to do, since we set the system up to do unattended upgrades, but it does not reboot automatically, we want to set it up to do that. So we logged in as the Pi user. We want to do sudo nano etc cron tab. What this means is, as super user, run nano, which is a editor, and we want to edit the file etc cron tab. Cron tab is a scheduling software similar to Task Scheduler in Windows. So what we want to do is go down here to the bottom, and we are going to add the line 22, 4, 4, star, star, oops, root. Okay, so what this means is, as you can see here at the top, the 22 minutes after 4 o'clock the hour on the 4th day of the month, and star means every month and no matter the day of the week that it falls on, run as root, who is the super user, the command sbin reboot. So what we're saying is at 4:22 a.m. on the 4th day of the month, so the 4th day of every month, January 4th, February 4th, etc., at 4:22 a.m. it will reboot. Press Control X to exit, and we say yes, we want to save the modified file, and just hit enter to accept that. So now it'll automatically reboot once a month. That way, if there are any updates, you don't have to fool with them, and they'll be applied automatically. Okay, we are almost done with the Raspberry Pi configuration piece. The next thing that we want to do is we need to create some profiles. The profiles are used by devices or users. You can actually install them on your laptop, etc. You want one profile per device or user. So we're going to create one for the GL.iNet router. So the way you do that is you go PiVPN add. We're going to call this one the GL.iNet, and it creates it. So in case you wanted to install one on your laptop, let's go ahead and create another one. PiVPN add. We'll call this one XPS laptop. Okay, and let's try a third one. VPN add, and we'll create one for our Android. Galaxy S9. Oops. Okay. So we have these created, and if you lose one of these devices or you move it and you need to remove it, the way you do that is you do PiVPN -R, and it shows you a list of them. And if you decided that you upgraded your phone and so you wanted to get rid of the Galaxy S9, you could hit 3, and it'll say you sure you want to get rid of it. Hit enter for yes, and now that one is no longer valid. Okay, we are almost finished with the Raspberry Pi configuration. The next thing we need to do is we need to find some way to get these configuration files off of the Raspberry Pi and onto our Windows machine. So if we look, ls is the same thing as dir. So we look at our files here, and we'll see there's a folder called configs under bookshelf here, configs. So we'll go into configs, and you'll see that there are configuration files. We have removed the Galaxy S9 from the active configuration, but it keeps the file here anyway. So what we need to do is we need to get these onto our Windows machine. So how do we do that? We need a piece of software, but fortunately Windows 10 makes this very easy. We go to our Start menu, go to Settings, go to Applications, go to Apps and Features, then go to Optional Features, and we want to add a feature. And the feature we want to install is OpenSSH. So you just type OpenSSH, and we want to install the OpenSSH client. Say OK, let it think for a little bit. Okay, it is installed, so we can close this. And let's go ahead and work on getting those downloaded. So the next thing you need to do is start a command line. So you type cmd, and it opens a command prompt. So now we need to create a directory for these to go into. So we're going to go dir, and let's create one just called VPN info. Okay. Now we'll change into VPN info with the change directory. You'll see there's nothing in here. So the next thing we'll do is we'll use that software that we just installed, and we will copy these files down. We'll do SCP, stands for Secure Copy, and we're going to be using the Pi user ID at our IP address. So this will be the IP address that you use. And we're going to go colon, configs, then /, and remember we called it GL.iNet.conf, GL.iNet.conf, and we're going to copy it to our current directory. So what this command means is using secure copy as the Pi user, connect to the device at 10.0.250.48. Obviously that'll change depending on your IP address, probably 192.168 something. We're going to pull from the configs subdirectory, and we're going to pull the GL.iNet.conf. This is what we called that first configuration file. And you remember when we did the ls before, you can see down here below us, the XPS laptop and the GL.iNet are right there. So we hit enter. This period at the end means copied into the current directory. So we'll hit enter here. It'll say it's never seen this before, so we say type yes. And so it's saying we're trusting this machine, and we type in the password for the Pi user. Oh, didn't actually work. Let's try it again. There we go. I just actually hit the up arrow to repeat the previous command, typed in the password, and it worked okay. Now if we look, we have a file called GL.iNet.conf. And the hard part is finished. The next step is to configure the GL.iNet router. Before we begin configuring the GL.iNet router, the next thing we need to do is to make sure that we have forwarded the proper ports. So you'll log into your router. Again, every router is a little bit different, but what you'll do is you'll look for virtual servers or port triggering, something like that, and you'll enter in the port number, which we had accepted the defaults, which are 51820. The internal port is the 51820, which is the port on the Raspberry Pi. So it's saying on the internet, anything coming into port 51820, forward it to port 51820 on the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. The protocol, some of these default differently. Some will default to TCP. What you want is all protocols because you want to be able to do TCP and UDP. And you want the rule to be enabled, and you save it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start configuring the GL.iNet router. You'll see that there are a couple of connections on here. There's a WAN port, there's a LAN port, and there's a power connection, and there's a switch and a reset button on the side. What we care about is the LAN port. We're going to take and plug a cable into the LAN port. We're going to plug the other end of the LAN cable into our network jack on our laptop. We're going to take a power connection and we will plug it into the power connection here. And we will plug it in to USB port on the laptop. It doesn't use much power, so it can easily be powered by the USB port. And you'll see the lights will blink for a few seconds. It just takes maybe 30 seconds for it to get booted up. Leave it here for a second. And then we want to go to the IP address 192.168.8.1. 192.168.8.1. And have the cable plugged in. It takes a little while for it to actually get booted up, but you'll notice that the end yellow light is now on. Originally when it first starts, just the first light's on, but now the last light's on. So let's go to 192.168.8.1. That's the default. And we want to select English for our language. And we got to enter in a password here. Enter in a good password. You're into the administration. Okay, there are three different things that we need to do here. The first thing we need to do is we are going to connect it to the internet. So you do that by looking at the internet tab here. Scroll down to repeater. click on Scan. And it will show a list of various SSIDs. So we're going to pick this one, and we will put in the password. Okay, now remember, this is what you will do every time you go to a new location. You'll have to log into the router, go to the Internet tab, scan for Wi-Fi, select the proper network, put in the password. So if you're in a hotel, you'll go in, you'll look for the hotel's Wi-Fi network, you'll put in the password, and tell it to join. If you're at Starbucks, you'll do the same thing, or if you're at a friend's house, you'll connect to whatever network they tell you and give the password that they give you. So click on join. Give it a second here. One of the things that you'll see here is it says success, and now we are connected. When you do this, be aware that the free Wi-Fi in hotels is sometimes quite limited, so it'll be difficult for you to watch streaming movies or your live TV over this device. It's not a problem with the device. It works fine in many locations, but if the bandwidth is very slow, that could be a problem. The next thing we need to do is go down here, and we're going to look at upgrade. We'll look at the current version is 3.102. Go to auto upgrade, and I recommend that you turn on auto upgrade because it helps with security. But we are on the current version. Okay. So the next thing you want to do is you want to set up the wireless. Okay. This is where you set it to match your home network. You have to be careful if you're setting this up at home. If you're at home doing this configuration and you make it appear as your home network, some of your devices are going to try to connect to this device right away. So in this case, we are on mirror. So we are going to actually change our Wi-Fi name to, we're going to call it 1 so that it's not exactly the same. If you're setting it up someplace else, it's fine. You can do it elsewhere, but if you're at home, you'll want to change this when you get to the new location. Okay, the next thing we need to do is set up the wireless. The wireless is what it presents. And so you want to set this up as your home network. Now be aware, if you are at home, some of your devices are going to want to connect to this device. They're going to want to, because it will appear as your home network. So just be aware that it could cause some devices to act a little strange in your house. Okay, so what you do is you click on Modify, and you put in the network. And you put in the same Wi-Fi key as your home network. Okay, and you leave everything else the same, and you apply. Last thing we want to do is go down here to VPN. We are doing WireGuard, so we open the WireGuard client. Okay. Now we need to add a new profile. Click on Add New Profile. We will call it Home. Click Next, and it wants you to paste in the information from the file you downloaded earlier. So we'll do that. So let's open up a Windows Explorer. We go to the C drive VPN info where we were downloading the files earlier. I'm going to right click on the file. We want to, because it's not a file that's normally opened with Notepad, we're going to open this with Notepad. And you'll see that there's a bunch of information here. So we select it. You do that with Select Alt or Control A. And then we're going to copy it. And we're going to go back over here to our GL.iNet. And we're going to paste it in. I'm going to click Add. And it's been successful. So let's go ahead and connect. And you can see that as long as you see data transferring, you are connected. We are almost completely done. The one last thing that I'll show you on here is under More Settings. There's something called a button setting. Click that. And this is the little switch on the side of the device. I like to set it to WireGuard on and off. And this helps you when you're staying in a hotel. You can click it to the right to turn it off. If you're having trouble connecting to the wireless and you have to go through their little portal where you enter in information, it's handy to be able to turn the switch off, and that'll allow you to connect to the portal, enter the information, then you can flip it back on. But if it's blocking your traffic, you can't get to that portal unless you turn it off. That way you don't have to go through the actual menu here and disconnect the Wi-Fi. You can actually do it all from the side. So what you do is you set that to WireGuard client toggle on and off. You hit apply, and you're done. Now when you go to another location, you just plug your little device up, connect it to your laptop with a network cable, log in, go to the internet, go down here to, in this case you won't be connected, so what you'll do is you go down to repeater, so let's pause this right here. So when you travel to a new location, what you'll do is you'll click on Internet. You'll go down here to Scan. It'll scan for Wi-Fi. You'll select the Wi-Fi network that you want to connect to. Type in the password and click Join. If it's a hotel, you may have to flip the little switch off on the side, but your Roku or your Firestick will see your home network, and it will happily connect, and you'll be able to watch any of your movies or live TV at any remote location. I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, like and subscribe. Leave me a comment down below. Those really help the channel. And if you have any questions, I'll see if I can answer them for you.